Should Breeze topic number 4 says, is there validity in her words outside the American point of view? What is the solution? So let's see what this link that's attached takes us to. It takes us to YouTube. Uh, let's check out the video and then chat.
It just evolved. And the plantation is still alive and well. And it survives on silence. So we're not allowed to complain about the things which really ail us. Especially us, Black women and children, we don't get to complain about what really ails us. And especially if it's internal, we can't speak because then we're seen as trying to bring down the Black man.
I want to talk about your song from your new album, Silence. You have a line which says, plantation survives on silence. Please elaborate on the message you were trying to convey with this lyric.
Well, we like to tell ourselves so we're free now and we celebrate things like emancipation and independence what we don't have. But slavery never ended. It just evolved. And the plantation is still alive and well. And it survives on silence. So we're not allowed to complain about the things which really ail us. Especially us, Black women and children, we don't get to complain about what really ails us. And especially if it's internal, we can't speak because then we're seen as trying to bring down the Black man. You know, when the Black man hurt us, we can only speak about the white enemy. We're not allowed to speak about the Black abuser. You know, when a Black man does something when he's young, them say, "Oh, he has his whole future ahead of him. You're really going to put this on him. This is going to blight his future." And then him grow a little bit more, and you want to talk about him. Remember, the victim is there suffering, you know. This person also have a future ahead of them, you know, which has been destroyed. I know them want to talk. No, you can't talk because he's in college now. And this is still his future you're going to mess with. All right? You try to talk later. Oh my God, the man I get married. You can't believe you're going to really do that to your family. Oh no, you can't speak. Him have kids. No, why you think this is going to do to him kids? And then him dead. And you try to talk and him be like, oh my God, have you no respect for the dead? So when can we speak? And this is why the plantation survives. The slavery will never end. We are still being mauled. We're still being sexually assaulted. We're being abused in every shape and form. We're being victimized. They might take away things them from we. You know? Them are we pimp. Them have we hook out. And we can't talk. We have on muzzle. Every single last one we have on muzzle. Some of them have on some diamonds on it. So we think we're more special, but we're muzzled. And we haven't learned to fight for each other's right to speak. Some of we talk and the rest of we try to shut you up. Remember one time some survivors called some names and one of the bossy slave them get up and say, them are some all crosses. Imagine I call the good man name. The good man rapes mad, you know. All crosses. And so the plantation survives because we can't talk. A little boy will get molested, he can't talk. Remember, you know, he might go get ostracized and oh God, film stigma go even bigger than Philly. Little boys, if anybody will pull the bung there, you know, Jamaica was showing up. That the dab their old back a lot if the little boys ever start talking. So this human farm keeps going because the culture of silence protects it.
Well, let me hear you say mountain, mountain, mountain.
Sorry about that. I will say this. I'll keep it short. Two things can be true at the same time. I'll leave it at that. I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. Gas them up. What did you hear there? Is there validity in her words outside the American point of view? And what is the solution?
Yeah, I think that there are, women who are and children who suffer abuse, but I think that's a failure of the state and a failure of the community. Um, you know, she She reminds me of these, new age women. I'd be shocked if she has a husband. Um, you know, I'm not convinced of the black man as the abuser hypothesis or argument, but what do I know? I think that yeah, I'm like I said, I'm just not convinced by that. Everybody has the same story, you know, and then yeah, there are women who go through terrible things, and I think, like I said, it's a failure of the community, and it's a failure of the state as a whole. Um, but when we talk about the community failing, we can't have sacred cows, and I think a lot of times we end up with sacred cows that we can't touch, and more importantly, we're not ready to understand that part of the community having protection means that the community has to have control. And a lot of times people don't like that. So that would mean, if you do something wrong, the community will have a say in your individual behavior, and people aren't prepared for that. So, yeah, no, not to dismiss the legitimate things that she's talked about. There's a lot of abuse that goes on, and I think it should be addressed. But I'm just always very cautious when they present it like it's the evil black man thing. The black women of today are just so good at presenting that narrative.
You guys make sure to check out Kansan African Mind. Gas was on there this week. It was Gas Them Up versus the women. And there's a segment where Gas Them Up has a similar conversation to how he responded to the prompt just now. I think folks should really listen to the idea that the black man had this power to dominate his woman. That's something I think that's a talking point we have to discuss fully. By the way, I want to shout out Trigger Happy 262. Since earlier, one of those prompts he put up earlier, the one with Malcolm X, I think he called it like the enemy analysis or something. That's a good example of a subject that we should bring back weekly: beauty standards, enemy analysis, media analysis, etc. So I just want to point that out to Trigger Happy 262. Bakari dropped off. Buana, is there validity in her words outside the American point of view? And if so, what is the solution? Buana, we can't hear you.
Man, come on, sister. Anyways, I would say that I am careful with this. I am very careful with this because I know that I've heard them say that we have a rape culture. That's what I've heard. And I've all heard that too for Jamaica. And I'm wondering to myself, where's the Bahamians who practice this rape culture? I mean, I don't know where they exist. Rapists practice rape culture. I'm not a rapist. I'm not a rapist. So I don't want to be blanketed with that term when there are people, elements that exist within my society who do these kinds of things, not only to women or to children, even to boys as well. You know what I mean? And then they blanket this whole thing, put it on men and say it's a culture of the Bahamian society or the men in the Bahamian society. Whoa, I'm like, hold on. Don't label me with that term if I am not guilty of that. And I'm sure that the Jamaicans would feel the same way. There are scumbags that exist, rapists that exist in different elements of these men that exist in many different societies. But don't just put that blanketed term on all men. So I'm leery when women come with these terms, these blanketed terms, and then put it off on black men as if this is how we behave in general. You know what I mean? Don't take the specific And when I say specific, I'm talking about very small numbers based on the experiences of women, some women, and then put it off on the whole society. I'm very leery of that, and I am very careful with that. So I have a problem with people empowered to create these kinds of arguments and discussions and make it seem monsters. We are monsters. And I'm not trying to dismiss the fact that these things do occur in society, in our society, as well as other societies as well. But I just don't I want the feminine to be very specific with their arguments in terms of their personal experiences, and don't blanket me or people like me with that term and idea. Don't put that in the minds of the world or people who may be viewing the Caribbean in a particular way. So I am very careful with that. As far as the solution is concerned, I have a zero tolerance policy for it. And I hope that my sisters or people who I even care about don't bring these kinds of issues to me, because like I say in the last discussion about these kinds of matters, there is no law, no man-made law that would stop me from doing what I need to do if someone who I care about was to come to me with in terms of these kinds of issues. And I think that I would not necessarily want to put my sisters or mothers or cousins or whatever in that position, because they know full well that I am not beyond. I would gladly go and receive a 30-year jail sentence if I was to know this was to happen to them. Gladly. So that's my solution. But I know the state doesn't see it that way. The state give a man like that 30, 10 years, etc., etc., etc. I don't see it that way. I think that you should void if he was to commit a particular act, even especially on girls and boys as well. They shouldn't be breathing. That's my solution. But I know that's not the state solution. I'm hoping that these kinds of issues never arise in my particular situation. But that's my solution to the issue. There should be a zero tolerance policy on it, because there's no reason for it. You shouldn't be messing with little girls, pubescent girls, or little boys, or even grown women. What I mean? It's too much women out here for you to have to force yourself on a woman. It's too many women out here who are willing, But I take a zero tolerance approach to it. But I am very careful when you have these blanketed arguments of rape culture in terms of the Caribbean society. But that's my particular perspective on it.
I appreciate that, untouchable. In the chat, Trigapi262 said, "This is why state seizure is important. When you do that, you can simply ban rape and whatnot, full stop. Wouldn't even have a discussion." Earlier, Ketter said, "I don't want to relativize her words. There is abuse within our society, but the black man or some form of monster roaming his community isn't true." And that sums up what I meant by, two things can be true. There could be some abuses going on, but please don't equate us with the guy who designed and continues to design the major abuses of the world right now, right? Kennedy then says she places black men in the same category as white men. I agree. Trigger Happy 262 says, knowing how feminists argue, they will make the argument that just because you aren't a rapist doesn't mean you are complicit of rape. I think that's a load of horse shit, but that's how they argue. He says, this is why, and I said this before, this is why state seizure is important. When you do that, you can simply ban rape and whatnot, full stop. Wouldn't even have to be a discussion. With all of that said, let's welcome in observing immigrants. Marcus Garvey is away from the chat. How are you this week?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So, you know the prompt. What say you to all of this in the prompt, as well as what you heard from the panelists?
Okay. Well, Gasabop said she's not married. That's correct. She's not married. I think that her comments were
How
made
did I know?
because yeah, but I think her comments were made because I think it was earlier this year that she revealed that she was raped at 17 years old by a famous Jamaican artist, but she never told the name. So I think she's speaking as a victim. And then she wrote a song about it because, again, the interviewer asked her in response to lyrics in her songs. Because I don't know if anybody knows, she's Tanya Stevens, a Jamaican singer. I don't know if anybody else knew that. Anyway, um, in the sense of her point of view, I think that one of the issues I keep hearing is that when issues are brought up in the community, people want to take it personally and then ignore the situations that these things occur. So, like, I've spoken to women in women's shelter. A lot of those women were abused. A lot of the women's shelter had a lot of black women, more so than I saw white women or Hispanics or Asian women. But a lot of them were black women, and some of the stories were horrific. And a lot of them, almost all of them, were at the hands of black men. I met a Latino girl. She was a lesbian. Her horror story in terms of relationship wise was at the hands of a black woman who was a lesbian. I mean, she was a lesbian. um Family wise, I have a cousin who was molested by her stepfather, and when I spoke to his cousin, he's like, oh, this is something that happens. Their whole family is known for that. Yeah, they're a wealthy family from Beckway, but everybody, all the males in their family are known for molesting kids. And he went on to say, well, oh, some of them like boys and some of them like girls. So the fact is, yes, it may not be a prevalent thing among all men, but it exists. And then, I asked, well, what is the solution? So after everyone's being made it clear that they're offended by not being blanketed by the statement, again, now what is the solution? Because after your offense, what do you say to the ones who do it? What is the solution to the ones who do it? Because again, I'm saying out of away from an American point of view, because it happens in the Caribbean. I don't know if it happens in Africa as much, but for sure it happens in the Caribbean. We know it happens in America for sure, but it happens. Then these little girls and little boys grow up to become dysfunctional adults who then you talk about not being able to function properly in a adult relationship. Yeah, because I can tell you that my cousin who was molested by her stepfather, she's got, I want to say four or five sons, each from a different man. Yeah, she's been promiscuous she was pregnant by 16. Yeah, because her stepfather was smart. He molested her, but he made sure that he got a vasectomy because to him it was more shameful to be to get her pregnant. Yeah. So he found more shame in getting her pregnant than the fact of what he was doing to her from age 8 to 16. So you have women with trauma. As men, this happens because I don't even think men trust men around their children. So as men, what would the solution be? Because you have to look to the men for the solutions, right? Because if a
No,
woman, you
wrong.
don't look to men for the solutions. Okay,
Nope.
what do you do?
Independent women solve your own problems. Don't come to me.
But how
Don't
about
come
the
to me
women
now
who are
that the
not
barn is
independent?
burning.
How about the women who are not independent? What if it was your sister or your aunt or
See,
something? Then
they all independent. Listen, look, listen. At the end of the day, if the barn is burning, you can't come to me when the barn is burning. That means that if you wanted my solution, most of these women would have probably been under male jurisdiction and authority early on.
but what
If
if
you
that
look
male
around,
jurisdiction is abusing them
and that's why I said it's
sexually?
a failure. That's why I said it's a failure of the community. That's why I said it's a failure of the state, and that's why I said earlier in the last prompt that we need to reconsider the nation state because the silence that she's talking about. These are things that um, historically black people we didn't do these types of abuses to each other, right? These are all Muzungu practices for the most part.
And I
Um,
agree with that, but
so
then
so
it exists in our community. Now what?
Okay, so that's why I said it's going to take men and women
Hmm.
having stronger extended families and so-called nuclear families where both everybody is watching the children's safety is a priority, and there are no sacred cows. So if heaven forbid, you know, my brother or me shoot me in the head, there is no sacred cow. If I'm stupid and useless enough to do something that crosses the line of decency and honor, shoot me in the head, get me out of here. There are no sacred cows. There's no, oh, you know, I'm going to make an excuse for this person. No. Problem is, we have sacred cows. And the other problem is, in a lot of these communities, quite often, the person or the people who are doing these things, not always, but quite often, are people who have access to power. So they have money, they have resources, they have things, or they connect to somebody. So we all cover up for these people. These things happen in Africa, where you see, you know, house girls might be sexually abused. You hear stories. These things are happening, and people are being taken advantage of because historically, you could go to your community and your local, you know, village associations or group associations and voice your issues as to what happened to you, and people will stand up and fight on your behalf. But you know, we live in a society where for a pair of Jordans and you know, some money, everybody will turn you know, turn their face and look the other way. But I'm just saying that I'm not a believer of this. Oh, look for male solutions. No, if the women want male solutions, that means they have to be prepared to be under male authority and jurisdiction, and they don't want that.
Okay, you just said that the community knows this happens and turns a blind eye. Who runs the communities? And okay, so you're saying that so far the solution is turn a blind eye. Again, my question is, so what is the solution? Because turning a blind eye hasn't stopped it. All you have
I
now
didn't
is a
say turn a
generation
blind
of
eye.
more men in dresses.
I never
And
said that.
you
I never
literally
said
just
turn
said
a
it.
blind eye. Where did you hear
You
that?
literally just said that. You just said that the
I didn't
community
say
turns
that.
a blind eye. You said the community turns a blind eye. And I'm
No, no,
saying
I said the person with power, because they are able to throw resources around. I never said that's the solution.
no, I never said you said that solution. I'm saying that that's what the community is using as the solution. I'm saying, well, since that's
But
being
that's
used
not
as
a
the
solution. That's a
solution,
band aid.
okay, okay, but I'm saying that that's what they have chosen as the solution. So I'm saying, since that is what they have chosen, then what should the solution be?
Again, okay, I don't know
I
Jamaica
would
too well.
say that
Are the Yeah, go ahead, bro.
You in the matrix
yeah,
there,
I
boy.
would say the solution in very. Oh shit! I don't know. I don't know. I'm back in.
No, go ahead now. Go ahead
I'll
now.
go and come back in. How about that? Yeah, I would make the penalty for committing these kinds of acts so heinous that someone who would to be charged and convicted for this particular kind of crime to be so heinous that they would not want to commit these kinds of crimes. And like I say, I take a zero tolerance approach to it, because there have been several people within my community and people who are in power and authoritative position who have taken advantage of young girls. You know, some of them, and it's weird because the prisoners, the people in prison, will exact more so-called what I consider to be more justice than the so-called legal system. And I would, there would be no lens that I would go once it is proven in evidence that these people, these kinds of act, whether using their authority or using their relationship to harm and molest vulnerable people, that I would go to exact what I believe would to be justice for these kinds of people. Itself, death, because there is no reason, and I'm talking about women and men, by the way, because there are women within our community who commit these kinds of acts on young boys as well. Because this is not necessarily only a male crime, even though majority of men commit these kinds of crimes. But there would be no lengths that I would not take to ensure that these kinds of things happen again. And what is best, I believe, for a molester or a person who takes advantage of people is death. You can't come back to molest somebody else if you're dead. So I'm an extremist of these kinds of things because there's no reason to do it. And when I say that, that should be applied to male and female. because I see in the results now. You see in a lot of these, what I believe is the consequence of it. What I believe is the consequence of these abuses is the a lot of the young women are trading south because within their genders they become confused. And there's nothing like when a man on a boy treating the boy as if he's a woman. Now he goes through life thinking he's a woman, and you see that play out in society. Or a grown man abuses a girl, and she doesn't want that to happen to her again. So she takes on the characteristics of a man, thinking, well, this is the best way for me not to be abused anymore. And now change, and society is twisted and perverted. So I like I say, I take these things very seriously, and I have a zero tolerance approach to it. So maybe you don't want to ask a so-called barbarian like me, because I'm an extremist with that kind of thing. I have sisters and I have nieces and nephews. Like I say, there is no law that exists on the book, and I do have nephews as well. There's no laws that exist on the book that would prevent me from exacting my form of justice on an individual like that.
Untouchable stopped unexpectedly. Trigger262 in the chat says, I want to minimize what Marcus Garvey is the way it's saying, because again, two things can be true, but what area were you in? It could simply be a matter of composition. The area is just black, and because it's black, you aren't seeing other women in there. Afro Native World, shout out to Afro Native World. He sent me some nice information earlier today in terms of African centered curriculum. I'll be exploring that just to respond to Afro Native World. I'll be exploring that and reaching out to that person as well to have a chat. He says Muta talks about it all the time. Community gone. Ketter says most crime is committed through lack of resources. These girls are usually low hanging fruit for men who haven't been taught that having power is the only way to be a man. Ketter says capitalism, with its artificial scarcity concept, drives people into becoming beasts. We need to change our ground thoughts about our economical system. Observing immigrants. This was your prompt. You want to add a word?
Yeah, I just want to quickly say this, Koku, because, for example, when I talk about community, I'll never forget. I went to my grandfather's village. This was in 2001, and so when I went with my grandfather and my mom, this is in Nigeria, and there was a friend of his, and he was asking about his friend, and he said, "Oh, where's this man?" And they quickly said, "Oh, yeah, we threw him in the evil forest." He said, "Oh, what happened?" He said, "Yeah, he slept with his daughter." And my grandfather said, "He did? Damn. Well, okay." And that was the end. Never brought him up again. Right? So the community, basically, you don't exist anymore. You committed a taboo. So, excuse me, egregious. They don't want you anymore. So I think we need to get back to that. But how are we going to do that in the West?
Interesting. Observing immigrants.
Yeah, one of the initial statements that was made after watching the video was that yeah, Europeans are known for this stuff, and yes, I know they are. I've heard stories of white men sleeping with their kids. Yeah, I just watched a video on YouTube where the father, when his daughter was born, got an erection holding her, and I'm like, how does that even logically work out? He knew from the time she was born that he was gonna molest her, and but it was a story on YouTube about Mormons, and they were members of the Mormon church, and the mother came in and caught him molesting the daughter, and it happened for years and all this stuff, and the daughter is now grown and traumatized. So yes, we know Europeans have done it. With that said, our people have been exposed to these people for so long that we have, I consider Europeans a virus, and we as a people, a colonized people, are infected by this virus. So even though they are known for doing it, and yes, we imitate almost everything they do, and I kind of feel like every delinquent thing that Europeans do, we try to do it better. um we still have to address the fact that our people are doing it. Kids are being violated. hell, adults are being violated. And again, my thing is we
So
can't.
what's your solution?
My solution is that we have to train our sons not to do this. My two sons, my two teenage sons, was watching the video with the that I was telling you about, with the Mormons and the man molesting his daughter and stuff like that. I speak to my sons plainly. I tell them, that behavior is not acceptable. For me, if I found out that my sons was doing that, I would not ask too many questions. I would deal with the situation. Yeah. I also understand, like my husband. I told my husband when our daughter was born, I said to him plainly, I said, if I ever find out that you molested any of our children, and at that time we only had one child, I said, I would kill you. I said, I'm telling you that now, and I'm telling you in plain English so that when you realize you're dying, you would know what happened. So I made it plain. I made it plain to myself that I was gonna be one of these mothers who heard their children was being molested and be like, "Oh, she's lying. She wants attention, all that stuff." Nah, I'm gonna deal with it then and there. You know, one way or the other, you're gonna, go missing or
But
what.
why do we always put the narrative towards men? Because this is the funniest part, right? Like
Well, I can tell you something.
when
I never
Yeah,
knew that women
Barbados is not
molested.
only a
I
male
never
crime.
knew that.
It's not.
Yeah, I never
wait,
knew
wait, hold
women
on.
molested children until I came to America. I
Okay, wait,
never
let me give you an
heard that women
example.
molested children.
Hold on. Let me give you an example of what I mean.
Hmm.
Like Juana said, if you go to any prison for the most part around the world, if you're a man who is a rapist or a pedophile, you're pretty much gonna die. If they catch you, they'll kill you, right? But a woman who drowns her children, kills her kids, women in prison don't even bother them. They're like, "Oh, sister, you killed the kids on Thursday? Oh, I understand the chicken was cold. I feel pity for you and compassion." So it's just like, no disrespect to you, but it's like, miss me with all this, you know, the man, the yeah, men for the most part. If we find out that this is what you do, no man high fives you. You gonna probably get killed. There's some guys who will get that angry. But my beef is, y'all women don't police yourselves either. There's a lot of women who not just sexually abusing, they're physically abusing their children, doing all kind of things to their kids. I sent Buana Hagaziki a video of a mother who was shouting at her daughters on a talk show. Big old lady. She's been abusing them girls since forever. Buana, if you remember that. And ain't nobody checking that lady. So I'm just saying, like, I'm not talking about your relationship. I don't know, but personally, if a woman told me what you said, I'd be like, "Oh, that's the end of the marriage," because you don't need to tell me that. I should know that off front because I wouldn't look to tell my wife that. But hey, like I said, I'm not talking about you and your husband's situation. I'm not trying to get in your personal life, but I'm just saying, like, I just find it interesting that we always just quick to blame men, 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 and it's like, nah, this is a societal
I
problem.
agree.
I mean, we have Epstein Island, right?
Women are abusive.
Look at the lady who was
Yes,
with Epstein.
women are
She
abusive.
she Guana. She's in a prison right now. What's the lady's name that was with Epstein? She's in a prison, in a low security prison,
Forget her name.
doing yoga. Yeah, she's doing yoga.
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ghislaine Maxwell. She's in a low security prison doing yoga, and she was bringing them girls and them little boys
Ghislaine
to that
Maxwell.
island
That's
doing
her
all.
name.
Yeah,
Yes.
come on, man. And they high fiving her. No, none of the female prisoners is stabbing
Yeah.
her up,
She
but
is
they
powerful.
broke Epstein's neck in jail.
I agree, and also let me and it's not to but I would let me just also say let me just to make this argument fair. Jill Maxwell also participated. She was complicit, as there are many women who know their partners are molesting their children and say nothing about it. What should be done to them as well? See the conversation is because on Mother's Day we bring them flowers and candy and things like that. But there are mothers that exist in our society that are complicit. They know these things are going on and they say or do nothing about it. Why? Because they don't want the relationship to break down.
Yeah,
So
and I
and
agree
these kinds of
because
discussions are not high as well.
I agree because my same cousin, I could never understand how I was in a completely other country, and I knew of her abuse, and I was like, how her mother under the same roof didn't know? Like, how did all the other relatives in the family know, but the mother under the roof didn't know? But you see, the husband was abusing her, physically abusing her to the point that she ran away to England, and she left her. Now that was his stepdaughter. He left. She left her daughter at the house with him, so he took the opportunity, you know. So she was being abused one way and then left her daughter to be abused in another way. So she knew. And for all the years she knew. And I can't understand how my cousin still speaks to her mother. And it's all the religion thing. She's like, oh, God has brought her through all this nonsense and blah 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 blah. And she still talks to her stepdad. I told her if it was me, I would learn to drive just to run him over. But she still talks to him on a cordial level. I'm like, so women, yes, are complicit. And what should be the solution to those women? I think the same thing. But I don't agree with gas them up in terms of, oh, women are in prison, high-fiving one another, and that men who know of molestation are killing one another. I don't know, because like in my country, Barbados is full of a lot of homosexuals, and I don't think that a man molesting a child or whether male or female is being seen as a negative thing. I don't even think is addressed, because
You're kind of answering your own question, though.
I think homosexuality is part of our culture. What happened?
I think you're kind of answering that question.
Which
It's
is?
not. They're not dealing. They're not dealing with it, and this is why when black men say, we got to get this LGBTQ shit up out of the community. This is the reason why. These LGBTQ guys, they ain't really going to deal with it, because the truth is, most of these LGBTQ black men and women too, they were created from molestation by other pedophiles and whatnot. Like, people don't talk about the grooming that goes on in that
Exactly.
life.
I agree.
Yeah, Banahagaziki, there's a joke up here in the States that 50% of Bayesian men are gay. And if you see a pair of twins, a set of twins, one of the two had to be gay. So that's a kind of a little joke we had.
Well, I like to say 99.9%, and the 1% are the ones that ain't born yet.
Atieno says, if they stop the men, the women wouldn't have to be quiet. Why is it when men's atrocities are brought up, it's the woman to blame? Women are complicit, but men are mostly the perpetrators. So that's something I'll throw back to the chat in a minute. Trigger Happy.
That's because mothers raise sons.
Trigger Happy 262 Plus says, I remember watching a Kaba Kameen video on rites of passage. He explained that African societies did rites of passage so they can remove the mind out of the penis for men and the mind out of the heart for women, all transferred to the brain. I understand why we did that. Women are social creatures. We have to make them a little mean sometimes and men less horny. Anyone else wanted to add a last word here? All right. That was a great discussion again. So if you guys in the chat appreciated that discussion, drop a fire emoji for me. Shoot the breeze topic number 6. By the way, shout out to Real Black Gentleman. I thought I saw him here earlier, and I think I saw Jay Bronze in the chat earlier too. So shout out to all those guys.